In a world where everyone knows everything. Yeah, right. One dad stands below everyone and yells, "I know nothing."
Please welcome.
This is the Dad Who Knows Nothing podcast.
All right, welcome to the Dad Who Knows Nothing podcast. I'm very excited today to have Stavros. And Stavros, he is the founder of the Stavros method. So this is a sustainable weight loss method. He's a sustainable weight loss coach. He's had 29 years in the weight loss industry, and he kind of has a unique method for helping people to not only achieve the weight loss that they're looking for, but to sustain it. So no yo-yo weight loss issues there. And so Stavros, I should have asked you this before we started, and I didn't want to butcher your name. So how do you pronounce the last name? And thanks for being on my show.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, my last name has a lot of letters. Is Mastrogiannis. That's the way we pronounce it in English, but in Greek would be Mastrogiannis, like the famous Greek singer Yannis.
Gotcha. Mastrogiannis. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm so happy to have you on my podcast today and for my listeners, because one of the things that really appealed to me about you was the story of how you came to this different perspective about weight loss and coming up with the Stavros method. And so can you talk me through where this came from and how you came to this method that you've been so successful coaching people with?
Well, I originally went to school to become a chef. I graduated from the Culinary Institute of America, and I really had no intentions of joining the fitness industry. It actually kind of fell on my lap. I realized, like, I was, as a young kid, trying to be in shape, trying to look good on the beach, I was trying to get into a routine of exercising regularly, to eating healthy, and I found myself, I was unable to stick with it. And that's how I decided that I realized that the average fitness professional doesn't understand people like me who want to be in shape, but don't love the process of getting in shape. And that's how I decided that, something, maybe there's a need for a coach or a trainer that understands people who want to be in shape but hate the process. And that's how I kind of end up in it. Now, in the beginning, I failed miserably because I took my certification, I went back to school, I studied nutrition and health and exercising. I got actually 3 or 4 major certifications in the process. But I found that although my clients were losing weight, pretty much all of them were regaining the weight back. And when I started looking at the statistics nationwide, I found out that 95% of the people gained the weight back. And I also realized that I was teaching my clients what other coaches had taught me, and I was unable to stick with. And that's when I started questioning, wait a minute, am I teaching the best things for my clients? And I got to give credit to my mother, actually, because one of the things I had learned in school was that breakfast, the most important meal of the day. So one day I was talking to my mother, and my mother says to me, how come you're telling your clients that breakfast is the most important meal of the day? I said, well, that's why I learned in school. That's all the top nutritionists are saying. Well, she says to me, now, by the way, I was raised in Greece, and I moved here when I was 15 years old. And my mother said to me, well, when we lived in Greece, did you eat breakfast? I go, no, not always. I go, did adults eat breakfast? Almost never. Like, adults, not something that adults normally eat. Sometimes they might have a little biscuit with their coffee, but it's not something that we normally ate. And he goes, who's healthier? Well, when I lived in Greece, thin was the norm. Cancer was a rare disease, and people in the 90s lived productive lives. So that made me start questioning what I learned in school. And then I started looking at other contradictions of how I was raised in Greece and what I was taught in school here. And I realized there's tons of contradictions. Like, for another example, like in Greece, our biggest meal was lunch, but we took a nap right after eating. Here, that I was taught that you shouldn't go to sleep right after eating. That's actually bad. And yet in Greece, we did the exact opposite. And there were many other things I started noticing. And that's what caused me to start questioning what I had learned in school. And the fact that the majority of people were gaining the way back. Well, another statistic I think your audience might find interesting is I got into the industry in 1992. That year in the United States, we spent $12.6 billion. Sorry, I take it back. That year, the obesity rate was 12.6%, and we spent $30 billion on weight loss product and services. Today, the obesity rate is over 40%. And the last number I just looked up a couple of days ago is $72 billion that we spend on weight loss product and services. Obviously, what's popular is not working, because if what's popular was working, we should be the healthiest nation in the world, and we're not. Anyway, so back then I started questioning, and I started slowly looking at, okay, what other the way I was raised, I started looking at other healthy regions like Okinawa, Sardinia, Ikaria, or other regions around the world that people have longevity. And I realized that those regions had similar habits that I was raised on. And that's how I started looking at what are the most important habits that everybody should be developed. And that's how I slowly developed my system of what to do in order to lose weight and get in shape. And most importantly, maintain the shape.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, and that's a great story,
Yeah,
and great for how you came, and what I find with most people when they're getting to, their method or their proven, method for achieving whatever they want to achieve for their clients, it's usually like they learn a little bit, they back up a little bit, they learn a little more until they get to this method. And certainly you're a good example of that. So you talked about 95% of the people who lose weight gain it back. Why do you think so many people have a hard time keeping the weight off? What do you see?
What I see is that there is two parts to sustainable weight loss. Part one is what healthy habits do you need to develop, and what unhealthy habits you need to eliminate in order to lose weight. I think a lot of coaches got that one right. I think there's a lot of good information out there. But most people forgot part two. And part two is, how do you apply that information into your life without burning yourself out? And unfortunately, I find a lot of fitness professionals have this idea that once people see results, they'll be motivated to keep going. So what they do is they help people change everything in their life all at once so they can see fast results. And instead, what happens is people burn out, because the simple fact is, I don't care what results you sell. If the method that you use to get those results is overwhelming, you're gonna quit. And that is why, and I find most fitness programs and diets, they don't take that into consideration. That the fact that people can just change overnight. You can go from eating junk food every day, drinking soda every day, not exercising at all, and all of a sudden the next day you are eating the perfect diet and you exercising every day. It can happen. Obviously, there are exceptions. There are a few people that with really strong willpower they can do it, but that's the exception, not the rule. So that's what I think is the main problem with the industry, which causes people not unable to keep the weight off.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because if it's hard to do, human nature is I'm gonna reach a point where I don't want to do, I either don't want to do it anymore or I can't do it anymore. And you're right, those with really strong willpower can push through that, but most people are going to hit that wall where it's difficult for them to continue.
Exactly.
So you talked about these other areas. Obviously, Greece is one of those. You mentioned a few other places. What do you think? So what's the biggest difference? You mentioned, eating a big lunch is typical in Greece. What are some other key differences in the diet with these healthy regions versus the United States?
One of the biggest difference is that obviously you read or heard about the Mediterranean diet. It's considered one of the healthiest diets in the world. The problem is that there's more to the Mediterranean diet than the food we eat or don't eat. For example, it's typical in Greece for people to, at that, when I lived there, by the way, in the 70s and 80s, now unfortunately it's not the same, but when I lived there, on average, people ate twice a day. One big meal, one small meal. Many adults only ate once. Now, that's not here. I was taught in school that we gotta eat 5 small meals a day, or 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks. That's something. If you look at healthy regions, on average, they eat twice a day. Another big difference is that we tend to eat our biggest meal at a time that we can rest afterwards. Like in Greece, we had a lunch was the biggest meal. By the way, in the main cities, but we had a 3-hour lunch break. So right after we ate, we usually took a nap for an hour, and then we got up and we went back to work. Now in the villages where my mother was raised, dinner was the main meal. Lunch was a light meal. Why? Because they didn't have a 3-hour lunch break. These people instinctively knew that, hey, they work in the fields. If I had this big lunch, I'm not going to be able to go back to the, whatever they had to do on the farm. So they made dinner the main meal and lunch the light meal. That's another difference. Also, people, when they ate more slowly, much slower, and much more mindful than we do today. Because especially if you have a lunchtime, most people, how much time do they have for lunch? 30 minutes. And usually by the time they get to the place to have the food, they usually have like 10, 15 minutes that you have to wolf down the food. Where in healthy regions, people relaxed. We ate, we enjoyed our food. And those are just some of the differences that I see between healthy regions and what we taught here. And how you eat, that's one other thing that I always talk about, is how you eat makes a big difference on how food affects us. And that's something that if you look at healthy regions, people eat, not just they eat different food, but they eat very differently on how they eat.
Yeah, meals in other cultures is more of a event. It's a ability to sit down, have conversations, multiple courses, nothing that's, overwhelmingly large, but just multiple courses to just easily progress through a meal while you're enjoying, conversation, and you're taking time to do it right. You brought up that point about eating fast, and I can't help but think about my 6-year-old daughter who's in first grade, and they give her lunchtime. She came home the first few days of school and she had half of her lunch still there. And we're like, why didn't you eat all your lunch? I don't have time. So they're even conditioned at a early age in school because, because of the schedules that they're on, to hurry up, eat your lunch. And if you don't, what do they tell them? If they don't eat their lunch, well, you miss out on recess. Well, all the kids want to go to recess. And so right there, they're like, well, I got to get done in 10 minutes so I can go play, and so even it's interesting, even at that young age, it's almost teaching people to eat fast. And what do we have? We have a term, fast food, that probably in other areas of the country, other areas of the world, that's not really a term that they use very frequently.
Yeah, we're supposed to enjoy our meals. And
right.
Did you know that every study that I ever read on slow and mindful eating, people end up eating less food without even trying? And by the way, here's the explanation as to why that is. Think about this. When do you get pleasure from food? When the food is in your mouth, right? When the food's in your mouth, that's when you actually get the pleasure from the food. Once you swallow the food, though, you're no longer getting any more pleasure because it left your mouth. So the longer each bite of food can stay in your mouth and the more attention you pay, the more pleasure you're going to get from each bite, which means you can end up eating less food but get the same amount of pleasure as somebody that ate twice as much but ate it twice as fast.
Yeah, and then you don't get the benefits. I think of people, and I've done this myself, pizza or something that people can consume really quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And you're eating that so fast that you've gone down 4 slices before your body even starts to register that it's full. Yeah. But if you're doing it slowly, bite by bite, you're really enjoying the experience, your body's going to be able to trigger your mind and say, hey, I'm getting a little full here, so we can slow it down a little bit more or stop.
Exactly, exactly. That
Yeah.
you then end up eating 2 slices of pizza, get full satisfaction, and
Right.
not need to eat the rest of the pizza.
And that not that horrible feeling afterwards.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, oh,
So
so great.
what about, so I've always been interested. So in Greece and in other countries that you looked at, I mean, do they have fitness programs? Do they have gyms? Do they have this over obsession with fitness that they do here?
No, actually, well, when I lived in Greece, and then here's the funny part. When I lived in Greece, in my hometown, there were no gyms, there were no nutritionists, none of that. Actually, we hardly even, actually, I didn't even know what a calorie was. And yet everybody was healthy.
Mhm.
Today, you go back to my home city, unfortunately, people have become much more overweight and unhealthy. We have, I think, two or three gyms and tons of nutritionists. And yet we're in worse shape than we have ever been. Why? And then here's the one question that I raised early on was, think about this. If you look at the 5% of people who are able to stay in shape with the current methods of weight loss, their whole life is about fitness. All they talk about is when they go to a restaurant, what can I eat, what I cannot eat. They are constantly worrying about getting to the gym, the workouts. And I was thinking, when I lived in Greece, nobody cared about any of that stuff, and yet we stay in shape effortlessly. Like a fitness program was an autopilot. And here's why: because all the healthy habits that kept us in shape were habitual. In other words, we didn't eat the diet that we ate because we wanted to be healthy. We ate that way because through our traditions, we made that a habit. It's a habitual behavior to eat the way we ate. We walked. I'll give you one tradition that we have in Greece. When you go out to eat in the summertime, you don't just go to the restaurant, you sit down and you eat. You go out, there's like a main street, you walk back and forth for like 30 or 40 minutes, like a casual walk, you chat with your friends before you sit down and you eat dinner. Then you got up and you walked some more before you went home. It wasn't you go to the restaurant, you plop down, you eat, you're done. Now, we didn't do that walking because we thought, oh, walking is good for you, we should be walking. No, it was a tradition to do. And that's what I realized is that in healthy regions, all the things that they do that kept them in shape, the reason they don't have to think about them is because through the traditions, they made them part of their culture, their habitual behaviors. It's like, again, the fitness program is an autopilot. And that's what I realized, like, that is the key, is whatever you do to get in shape, that has to become habitual behavior if you want to keep the weight off after you lose it.
So, and that's just a great example of, it was just part of people's makeup was to stay active, right? And I think that so much has changed in these last few generations. Work itself has become more sedentary.
Yeah.
A lot more work can be done sitting in a desk chair versus, an active type of moving around type of work, which there are still those jobs, but they're not as much anymore.
Yeah.
And then I also think, entertainment and other things have just become so easy for people that it's, kind of moved us all to a much more sedentary lifestyle. And so, and it sounds like that's probably originating in the United States, and that is starting to influence more of the world than the world's healthy habits of these other cultures influencing the United States.
Yes, unfortunate, because unfortunately, if you look at the major habits that we have in the Western world, those habits are developed through marketers, and
Mhm.
marketers are trying to sell a product. So they got people into eating breakfast. Actually, breakfast was something wasn't eaten in the past by anybody, including us here. I don't know if you know the story of how breakfast became a big meal. Do you know the story? With
No, why don't you tell it for us?
Yeah, Edward Bernays. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the famous Austrian, I think he was a psychiatrist. He was a PR guy. In 1921, a company, it was Beech Nut Packaging Company, which still exists today. They want to increase the sales of pork bellies, bacon, basically. So they hired him to do that. So what he did was he went to the doctor that worked for his company and asked them, do you think a high protein breakfast like bacon and eggs is good for people? Now, keep in mind, no offense to doctors, but doctors do not have any nutritional training.
Right.
Okay. And I think now it's like they do 1 hour, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly. So really, the doctor knows nothing about it, but yet he made the statement that, oh, yes, absolutely. So then he wrote to 5,000 of his colleagues to agree with that statement. And then Edward Bernays took that statement and wrote and did a PR campaign that said 5,000 doctors agree that a high protein breakfast like bacon and eggs is really good for your health. And that's how bacon and eggs became popular. And then a much heavier breakfast became popular. Started from a campaign to increase the sales of bacon. That's it. And unfortunately, a lot of our bad habits have come out from marketing campaigns to increase the sales of a certain food.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, when you just want to start talking about nutrition in this country, when everything becomes the highest cost and the most profit that they're going to make are the most processed foods.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
when that's marketed, that's the part of the food that is marketed the most. That's front and center and in your face in every aisle of a grocery store, right? And
Yeah.
they last the longest because of all the preservatives, and they're easiest to eat. You can just open up a box or a bag and start eating it. And
Exactly.
you can do
Less
it
prep time.
almost mindlessly without, and then before you know it, you've eaten a whole bag.
Exactly. And then they designed that way too. They designed to you want more. And to me, that's what, unfortunately, that kind of things have gotten to healthy regions. That's why I look at Greece and I look at how people, I go back to Greece usually every other year, and people have changed a lot. I mean, our habits have changed. No longer eat the way that I used to eat. Like now, breakfast has become a big meal in Greece too. And it's sad. And what I'm trying to do is start bringing back the old ways of eating, you know, and it doesn't mean we having less fun, by the way. We still can enjoy, like even junk food. Yeah, I eat junk food and I enjoy my junk food. But junk food was meant to be a treat,
Right.
something that you have once in a while. Who came up with the idea that you must have dessert after every dinner? Well,
Yep.
probably an ice cream company. But in Greece, we had ice cream, but it was something you had on the weekends. I remember my mother once a week on the weekend, like a Saturday or Sunday, whenever there was a good movie on TV, she will let us go out and get potato chip and Coke. It was such a big deal for us. Oh, we having potato chip and Coke. Now that's something kids have every day.
Right.
So those are the things we need to bring back. And
Yeah.
if we can do that slowly, we can reverse a lot of the health issues that we have today.
Yeah. We're having this exact battle with our 6-year-old because she thinks at the end of every dinner, every day, she gets dessert.
Oh,
And it's tough at a child's age because it's tough for them to understand that, well, you don't necessarily get dessert after every meal, or maybe not dessert the way you think of dessert,
yeah,
bowl of ice cream, piece of
yeah.
cake, cookies, so yeah, I think we can sometimes play a role in maybe making that something that they expect.
Do you know one rule that I have for parents that he's worked in my house and he worked? My kids are now they're 12 and 16, and they've been doing this for years now, and he's worked. My rule is Monday to Friday, Friday to 5 p.m. There's no junk food eating. After 5 p.m. on Friday, on the weekends, holidays, of course, they can have all they want. And I keep in my house all my favorite junk food. We keep the devil dogs, the cookies, the soda. But my kids have learned not to have those things during the week. And on the weekends, they can open a can of soda, drink half of it, and dump the rest because they don't have that once they have it. Because sometimes if you say no to somebody, then they want it even more. But if you
Right.
tell them, listen, on the weekends you can have all you want, guess what? They don't go crazy. And I found that has worked the best for my kids and a lot of my clients' kids having those rules.
Hmm.
The only thing I can help them with the grandparents, because those grandparents,
Yeah, they're
unfortunately,
trouble.
they break all the rules.
Or if your grandparents give it to you.
Yes, exactly. Oh, yeah, we'll make exceptions for that.
So we talked about exercise, and obviously, what is the best exercise in your opinion for overall health?
The best exercise for me, it's the one you will do. It's as simple as that. Because I know I've watched all these debates, like on aerobic machines, for instance. Which aerobic machine burns the most calories? And to me, that's irrelevant. The best aerobic machine is the one that you like. Because if you don't like it, it doesn't. I'll give you an example. They say treadmills are better than bicycles, okay, stationary bikes. And so you'll see a lot of experts talk about how treadmills burn more calories, blah, 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 whatever. But if you hate treadmills and you love the bike, if you do the treadmill because that supposedly burns more calories, guess what? You're not going to go as fast. You're going to hold off. You might even skip it more times compared to if you like the bike. If you like the bike, you're going to push yourself harder, most likely going to end up burning more calories. But the key thing here is which one you're going to be the most consistent with. And same thing with weight training, because exercising for me, there's three parts. Part one is something that's going to challenge your muscles, some form of resistance training.
Mm-hmm.
Part two, something's going to challenge your lungs and heart, some form of cardiovascular, like walking, running, jogging, biking. And the third one, something that takes your muscles to the full range of motion. In other words, stretching. And what I found is pick something that you enjoy, or at least don't hate. We'll settle for that. And start with the smallest step possible. And by the way, if you ask me my opinion, which is the best form of aerobics? Walking by far. Because walking is something that's natural, easy to do. You don't need any equipment. And one of the biggest benefits is it helps lubricate your joints. I always found it very interesting that a lot of people in the West are suffering from joint problems, knee problems, hip problems, where when I lived in Greece, that was very unusual to have somebody with a hip problem or a knee problem. And people lived well in the 90s and the hundreds. How come? It's because joints don't have a blood supply. They get the lubrication and the nutrients they need through movement. So walking is not just good for your heart and lungs, it's actually good for the maintenance of your joints. And it's simple stuff.
Yeah. And plus the other benefit to walking is it's something that pretty much anybody can do at any time.
Exactly. You don't
need you don't need special equipment.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to a special place. You can do it.
Yeah, you can, even if it snows outside, you can still walk in the snow. It adds extra excitement to it.
So your program, Live Your Way Thin, the Stavros method, what makes that different? I think we've kind of heard some of the things, but if you can sum up a couple of key ways that it makes it different than other weight loss programs, what would you say?
There are three things, basically. Number one, it doesn't just, the whole system focuses on 5 habits initially. Because I found those, well, take a step back. Are you familiar with the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule? Basically, yes. That states that 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. Well, I discovered the same thing in health. Like 80% of the results come from a small number of habits. Because if you look out there, there's tons of different habits you can develop, healthy habits. So those 5 are the ones that I found that all healthy regions around the world have in common. So my system does few things. Number one, we teach you these 5 habits. Now, the other thing it teaches you is not just proper nutrition, but you see, proper nutrition has 2 parts. Part one is what you eat. In other words, what are good foods to eat, what foods to avoid. But you see, proper nutrition has also 2 parts. The second part is how you eat. Mm-hmm. How you eat plays a big role. So part of those 5 habits that I teach people is the how to eat habits, who makes a huge difference. And I think the biggest difference is how we approach things. My method is based on the Kaizen method. I don't know if you're familiar with the Kaizen philosophy.
Yeah,
which
a
is
little bit. Yeah.
it's an ancient Asian philosophical system on how to apply change. So what I do is I coach people how to make these 5 habits part of their life through the Kaizen approach, which is basically we focus on only one small change at a time. And each time, once you develop, let's say, instead of trying to apply all 5 habits into your life at once, we start with first one. Once you made that a habit and it's part of your life and you do it without a problem, we work on the second one. So it's like a step-by-step approach that we help people develop these 5 habits and make them completely habitual to the point that you don't even think. I'll give you an example. During COVID, the lockdowns, I had to close down my place. On average, people gained 15 pounds during the COVID lockdowns. My clients gained nothing. As a matter of fact, actually, on average, they lost weight. Why? Because I taught them habits. So it didn't matter that all of a sudden there was this huge change in their life. Most of them were able to maintain those habits, no problem, even though they weren't even coming in to train with me. And to me, that's the sustainable solution to the problem, is help people make permanent changes in their habitual behaviors so they don't need anyone to keep up with them.
Yeah, because so many times eating is impacted by external stressors, external things happening. And if those things are really habitual, then it won't matter the external things that are going on around them, because it will just be like you said, some of the past cultures and how it's just been part of their life. It's just there. That's what they do. All right. So you kind of put your money where your mouth is with this method. There was this whole thing with McDonald's food and how this, I forgot what his name was, but he went through and tried to show the effects and did this whole documentary, showed the effects of, eating McDonald's food. Yes. You kind of did something similar, but you had different results. So can you tell me about this?
Yeah. The experiment, the documentary actually was, I think it was called the Super Size Me.
Super Size Me. Yes. Yep, that was it.
By Spurlock.
Right.
He went to McDonald's, for 1 month, and he was eating McDonald's food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And he gained, I think, 26 pounds, and his health became very unhealthy, so he had to stop. So I got curious, and I wanted to put my how to eat, because one of the things I teach people is that if you learn how to eat, you don't need to be as strict with what you eat. So your diet becomes more forgiving. So I said, well, let's put this let's test this theory. And by the way, I gotta say that the way I got the idea was one of my clients. He got to my program halfway through. He only had developed the 3 how to eat habits that I teach, but he was still eating the food he was eating before. So we're talking one day, and he says to me, Stavros, I still eat McDonald's and Burger King pretty much every other day at least. And he lost, I think, 68 pounds. His cholesterol had dropped dramatically. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize these habits of how to eat were that important. So I decided to do the experiment. So I went to the doctor. I had my cholesterol done, my weight, my blood pressure, everything. And I went to McDonald's for 2 months straight. So I was eating McDonald's. Every time I would eat, I had to go to McDonald's. I ate Burger King a couple of times, by the way, but similar foods like burgers and fries. And the only difference though was I ate only when hungry, and no more than twice a day, like I did in Greece. I made sure I had a 16-hour break between my last meal of the day and the first meal the next day. And I made sure I ate every meal slowly and mindfully. And as soon as I was satisfied my hunger, I would stop. So after 2 months of eating like that, this is my results. My weight went down 3 pounds, which is insignificant. Actually, 3 pounds is nothing. My cholesterol actually dropped 10 points from 168, if I remember correctly, down to 158, which again is insignificant, but still nothing bad happened. My blood pressure stayed the same. And for the people who think that I was working out a lot, I don't work out that much, because I believe in, like, I would say on average, I exercise maybe a total of 2 hours a week, maybe, and sometimes even less. And although I went to McDonald's for 2 months, ate the same food as Mr. Spurlock, I had completely different results because I watched how I ate.
And you just made sure that rather than breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you were just doing the 2 meals.
Yes, lunch
and
and
you
dinner.
were just, yeah, got it. Wow.
And it also gives me, like the other thing is I also, like, are you familiar with the keto diets? The
Yes.
low carb diets.
Of course, yeah.
I pretty much eat carbs, I would say, every day. Okay, I eat my pasta, my potatoes. Because here's the question I raised early. I raised early on. If people are saying that pasta, bread are bad for you, well, my question is, how come in Greece, Italy, by the way, too, we eat bread with every meal? We eat bread with pasta, actually. And how come pasta and bread do not bother us in Greece and in Italy, but it does here? Well, some people would argue that, well, the type of pasta, the wheat is different. No, the biggest difference is that when you eat only once or twice a day, you can get away eating pasta and bread a lot more than if you're eating 4 and 5 times a day. And that's what I discovered is that even if you're doing the ketogenic diet, I get into ketosis pretty much every day, although every night I eat pasta or bread or potatoes.
But still doing it is still eating mindfully though. So you're
Yes,
eating
absolutely,
slowly,
absolutely.
you're making sure, yeah.
And I don't stuff myself.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. So and you also have a recent book that came out. Now, when did the book come out?
It came out actually like a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. And I call it the Fat No More. And it's all about my philosophy on what habits we need to develop and how to develop them. And the other part I forgot to mention is that the beginning of my program, I also work with helping people develop a healthy mindset. Because at the end of the day, everything starts by the way you think. And that's the first step, actually, with my Stavros method is helping people develop a healthy mindset that will help them and support them in the development or elimination of any habits.
Yeah. No, very good. So if you had a couple things to kind of summarize for our listeners, the Stavros method, just to reiterate it again, what would you like them to take away?
To me, the thing I want them to take away is that if you want to lose weight and keep it off for life, is that first identify what healthy habits I need to develop and what unhealthy habits I need to eliminate or drastically reduce. Make your list. Then pick the most important one and start with that. Just start with the smallest step possible. And I want to leave the listeners with this. I like make a commitment to yourself to start with walking. And this will be my advice to them. Today, tomorrow, first thing in the morning, go out there and commit to walking 1 minute. 3 times a week, 1 minute. Now, a lot of people say to me, what would 1 minute do? It's not going to do much, but what it will do is get you into the habit of walking. Because if you say to yourself, I got to do at least 20 minutes, what's going to happen? You're going to get up tomorrow morning, you're like, 20 minutes, forget it, I'll do it tomorrow. By 1 minute, you can't talk yourself out of it. And I think that's the best way to start on the road to change.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So if my listeners wanted to learn more about this program, is it the liveyourwaythin.com website? Is that the best way for them to learn about you?
That one, actually, I have a new one now.
Okay.
Which is thestavrosmethod.com.
Okay.
Thestavrosmethod.com. That's my new website that it really focuses on my system. Because the Live Your Way Thin focuses a lot on my personal training that I do in Danbury, which a lot of people don't live locally. So the Stavros Method is about my online system.
Got it. Okay. So I'll make sure that that's in the listener notes, so they have an easy way to access that if they want to learn more about this method. So thank you very much, Stavros. This was a fantastic conversation. I enjoyed talking with you about your method and some of your thoughts and perspective on how to live more healthy, take off some of the weight that you may have, and more importantly, be sustainable with it and be able to live and keep it off through your life.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show. Really enjoy our conversation too.
All right.
Thank you for joining us on our journey to learn about various topics. If you'd like to get in touch with the Dad Who Knows Nothing, connect with him at the Dad Who Knows Nothing on TikTok and Instagram, or Dad Knows Zero on Twitter. If you have a moment and you like this episode, drop us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Have a great day and enjoy your journey through this game called life.